Welcome in to the Rookie Big Board. This is a special mock draft episode. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, the FF Educator, joined by two of the best in the business, especially when it comes to breaking down rookies. I have Drew and Price with me. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I'll give you both an opportunity to introduce yourself and your work. I'll point out that I brought on these two guys for very particular reasons. Drew is my analytics go-to guy, so I'm very interested to see his immediate reaction to some of these landing spots here as we go through the mock draft. So Drew, welcome in. Tell the people about your work, where they can find it.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm on Twitter at DFBeanCounter, and then I got Patreon, patreon.com/bulletproofff, and just launched a rookie guide this week. So that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. And like I said, I am a patron of Drew's as well, so I highly recommend it. I am a big proponent of balancing tape and analytics together. And my man Price is a fellow film grinder, but I brought him on in particular because Garret, we have great conversations about players, but we do not always agree on our tape evals, so I love having you on here as another film perspective to balance me out. How's it going, my man?
It's going well. This time of year is just so much fun, man. It's just like the draft, like even when the first round was over, like I enjoyed night two probably more than I even enjoyed night one. So, and then we, as we're recording, we're finishing up day 3 here, and it's just fun to see where some of these players go. And guys are like, yeah, I told you you'd go that high, you idiots. And then other guys are like, oh my gosh, how has he not been drafted yet? I'm so dumb. So it's just kind of fun to see how all this plays out.
Absolutely. It is a wild ride. So again, here's what we're going to do here on this mock draft episode. And again, you might be listening, you might be watching. I'm going to apologize ahead of time if you're watching. There is so much NFL Draft Bible action going on today. We have limited resources, so it looks maybe a little bit less professional of a video setup than we usually do. But you have the mock draft here side by side, so you still have an advantage if you're watching. But if you're listening, you're going to get a lot out of this as well. We're picturing we are one of those many folks here doing our Monday morning rookie drafts. A lot of leagues are set up to draft right away. And so we're going to go through 2 rounds of a Superflex PPR no tight end premium league and just talk about how we would approach the rookie draft Monday morning, taking into account everything we now know about player values as they've changed with the landing spots that we've learned on days 1, 2, and maybe we'll even take a player or two, gentlemen, that landed here on day 3 of the 2021 NFL Draft. Our order is going to go Drew, Price, and then me. So Drew, with that being said, man, why don't you kick us off here with the 101 against Superflex, PPR, no tight end premium league. Any surprises here with this first pick?
No, I'm just going to stick to the chalk and take Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence is probably the best quarterback prospect we've seen in quite some time. From an analytic perspective, he doesn't really stand out from the like normal numbers, but where I think he really does shine in like age-adjusted production, like he walked on to Clemson at 18 and put up the highest PFF grade from an 18-year-old in the history of PFF college football. So that's incredibly impressive. And then the other thing, like when I'm looking at quarterbacks, I'm looking for consistent excellence. So with Trevor Lawrence, we have 3 years of excellent production or excellent efficiency at the very least. So he's a slam dunk. He's, even from like the film guys like yourselves, I use Lance Zierlein's grades because they're, he's been doing it for 6-7 years now. And you can see how he has graded players over the years. And he gave Trevor Lawrence a grade that we've never seen from a quarterback before. So I'm assuming that's the same for you guys, where he's just like a tier above everyone else. Why fight it? Just take Trevor Lawrence.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a pretty easy pick, but where I've been getting all of my questions draft weekend now is what do we do after the 101? What's the value of the 102? How different is it than the 103? And where's that drop-off point in a super flex league for the quarterback position? So, Garret, I'll kick it back to you here. With the 102, where are you going with this pick?
Yeah, the 102 gets messy. I think Trevor Lawrence is a great pick at 101. I do think he's that guy. I think he's safe. But when we get to 102 here, I'm a big proponent of taking quarterbacks early in Superflex. And there's a lot of really good options. Unlike a lot of the other positions that we'll talk about, most of the quarterbacks landed in very good spots that we're pretty excited about. The question comes in, who did you have highest just as a pure prospect? What players went to what systems that we feel really good about? What other players do they have around them? How soon are they going to play? Like, there's just all of these different factors coming into it. Because of the murkiness, I think, of all of that, I am probably going to just stick with my evaluations from before, and I'm going to still take Justin Fields at 102. I think there's a shot that, Zack Wilson might start right away and Justin Fields might wait. It might take you a little bit longer to get to him. But when we're talking about a player that has all of the skills that we're looking for, Drew even mentioned the continued success over their career. That's what we saw over the past 2 years out of Justin Fields. 2 just excellent seasons against very good defenses in the Big Ten. He can run, he can pass. All accounts are saying that he's a very, very intelligent player. I was listening to Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, and they interviewed Coach Day, and they were talking about how Coach Day was saying, I coached Joe Burrow. He was one of the guys that I coached at Ohio State. His recall, his ability to be able to take things from the whiteboard to the field are very similar to Justin Fields. And so when you hear those types of things, it makes me feel very confident that he can be a good player and hopefully be the franchise saver for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. Justin Fields is still my number 2 overall on a Superflex board, just like he was going into this draft. Now, this is going to be an interesting pivot point because I know some of the fellas' tendencies here that are in the room. And depending on the selection that I make here, we could be seeing a really different set of next 3 picks. And so I think this is a real point in the draft where do you go Trey Lance in a Superflex league at 103, or do you, for the first time, consider outside of the quarterback position either Najee Harris or Jamar Chase? And so what I think I want to do is I don't know if I'll be making Drew tilt or I'll be making him happy because I know he doesn't want this guy, but I will take Najee Harris. I'm a big fan of Najee. He was easily my running back 1 going into this draft. He landed in a spot that I consider to be a fantastic spot. It's high draft capital. It is a ton of volume right off the bat. I understand the concerns with the Pittsburgh offensive line. For me, Najee Harris's pass catching ability will outweigh and help balance out some of those concerns, potentially inefficiency, running behind not the best offensive line. And so for me, Najee Harris is not only the running back 1 in this class, I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy football running back in 2021. So at the 103, although Trey Lance is in serious consideration here, I will use my 103 pick on Najee Harris and pass it on over to Drew with the 104.
All right. At the 104, I am going to take the best player in the draft, not named Trevor Lawrence. His name is Jamar Chase. And I understand the appeal of Trey Lance, but I'm going to go with Jamar Chase simply because he grades out in my process as the best wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. And when you have a chance to take a player like that, you just have to do it. There is no alternatives here for me. I have a transcendent tier in my grading process. And in that tier, I have Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, AJ Green, Braylon Edwards, and Jamar Chase. And that's it. Those are the only guys in it. So he is, in my opinion, going to walk into the NFL and have the opportunity to put up wide receiver 1 numbers as soon as a rookie. Probably not as a rookie, but it could happen. And then when I look at his situation overall, I see an offense that I believe is going to be a top offense in the NFL for the long term, for the entirety of Jamar Chase's career. And I just want to be a part of that offense. So I'm going to take Jamar Chase. He's going to probably get a 28% target share in a top of the league type offense. And you just can't beat that kind of volume.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the initial reaction was a little bit of dread from at least what I saw with fantasy football players in Jamar Chase landing in Cincinnati, but there is plenty of volume there. If you look at how they passed it over 600 times this past season, and Ryan Finley played the last 3 games of the season, so there is plenty of volume to go around, and I think, T. Higgins is fine, Tyler Boyd might take a little bit of a dip, but I think you can legitimately have 3, wide receivers there that are at least wide receiver 3 or higher, with Chase probably being the best benefactor of there. So I am all in favor of Chase still being a top 5 rookie pick. So Garrett, that brings it to you here at the 105. So I'm interested if Trey Lance is the guy or if you have your eye potentially on somebody else.
Yeah, Trey Lance and Zack Wilson are both very, very close for me. I am going to go with Trey Lance. I think he just offers crazy upside. I had him above Zack Wilson before the draft. We know that it might take a little bit longer for him, just like I mentioned with Justin Fields, to get on the actual football field. Jimmy Garoppolo's still there. They do have a very good defense. It could be one of those teams that he does enough and he keeps them in games. But long term, you don't trade 3 first-round picks to move up and get a guy like Trey Lance if you don't plan on using him very, very soon. He will get on the field, and when he does, he's the best athlete of this entire group, win an entire season without throwing an interception, and it's just a sharp kid. So we're seeing some of these Josh Allen and Cam Newton comps, and those are the type of numbers that he could put up in this offense. I'm very excited about him. There's more things that we could say. We can go on about him, but for interest of time, I'll stop there. But I do really like Trey Lance, and I just think the ceiling is incredibly high with him in that Shanahan scheme.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think you also made a good point that I wasn't factoring in Zack Wilson on my analysis there, but I think a lot of folks probably would consider Zack Wilson to be in a similar range here as Trey Lance and even Justin Fields at this point, depending on how you had him pre-draft. Obviously, we were pretty familiar with where Zack Wilson was going to go, and there were no surprises there on draft night. I'm in a pretty interesting spot. There's 3 guys for me that are serious contenders for this pick. And again, this is a no tight end premium league, so Kyle Pitts isn't quite in my thought process yet, although he's not too far off. Zack Wilson is a consideration for me here for the quarterback positional value. Travis Etienne is also a serious consideration here. We're, I'm sure, going to talk about his landing spot, but I actually do not dislike his landing spot, but I'm actually going to go with Jalen Waddle because I am thrilled with where Jalen Waddle went. I love that he went to Miami. I think he is exactly what Miami is looking for. He is a perfect pair up with Tua, not only because of the way that they played in the past, but Jalen Waddle is a natural separator, and for a rookie quarterback, especially one with as good of anticipation as Tua has, having a natural separator like Jalen Waddle can be a real difference maker. And so that Miami offense in general, it looks like it's getting a little bit of a souped up upgrade here this offseason. So I'm happy to take Jalen Waddle here at 106. It's probably higher than you're going to find him in most drafts. Just to be honest, I think his ADP will be probably closer to 109, 110. But I'm all in on Jalen Waddle. He was my wide receiver 2 before the draft, and he is very close, but my wide receiver 2 still after the draft. And that's going to bring us back here to Drew with the 107.
So Zack Wilson's available, right?
He is?
Yep.
I'm going to take Zack Wilson. He's
All
the
right.
number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. He is a bulletproof quarterback, which is very, very good. I only have like 20 bulletproof quarterbacks in the past like 20 years. So him being one of them is a really exciting thing for me. And I get some people don't like his landing spot with the Jets, but honestly, I think Corey Davis is a pretty good football player. I really like Elijah Moore, who they took in the 2nd round. I think that, Jamison Crowder is that veteran presence, and Denzel Mims is on the team. I don't know if he's any good or not. We'll find out, but I don't think it's a terrible landing spot for Zack Wilson, and I'm gonna go with it.
All right. I think that makes sense. I think in the majority of Superflex leagues, if you have the 107 pick and you end up with the 2nd overall quarterback in the NFL draft, you're going to be in a pretty happy spot. And I think it's a realistic possibility here. Maybe 106 is a little bit more realistic, but I definitely could see either Harris or Chase pushing up. And so if you're sitting there in the mid-first round of your Superflex drafts and you're trying to anticipate, what might be available to you, I think Zack Wilson's a legitimate possibility here. So I think that's a great pick, Drew, and a nice point of value there that you got. All right, Price, we're up here at 108.
All right, at 108, I'm glad that Drew took Zack Wilson because I didn't want to be that annoying guy that's like, all right, I'm going to take another quarterback. So I appreciate that for relieving me of that. I am going to go similar with what you did with Waddle. I'm going with a pick here that is probably going to be slightly higher than consensus, but with a draft where we saw there were 3 running backs that went in the first 3 rounds. At some point, that value of getting one of those top 3 guys is just going to be really, really important in this class. And a lot of people would go with Travis Etienne here. I'm going to go with my top-rated back in the class, and I'm going to take Javonte Williams. Loved everything that I saw on tape from Javonte. We're talking about one of the most physically imposing running backs we've ever seen. PFF talking about his tackle breaking was just shattering records. He does all these little things well, as far as his vision is nice, his patience is nice. He doesn't have great top-end speed, but still very good at acceleration and burst through the hole. Good hands. He can be used on all 3 downs. The concern for people will be, but what about Melvin Gordon? Like, Melvin Gordon is still in Denver, and I understand that, but this is Dynasty fantasy football. This isn't just, 1 year and then we're done. This is Dynasty. I think that Melvin Gordon, his contract is going to be up at the end of this year. It will probably be a shared workload, but after this, I like what Denver's doing with their offensive line. I like what they're doing with their offense on the whole. There's a lot of weapons there in the passing game to open things up for him. And there's just not many backs that I feel confident can be true 3-down guys anymore. Javonte Williams is one of those guys, so I'm going to take him at pick 7.
Yeah, 108. I think this is a great pick and a good discussion point here, because this is exactly why I brought Price on, to have these kind of differences in opinions, because, for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and tip my pick here since it's mine anyways, I'm going to take Travis Etienne. And I think you're going to have people in your league that prefer Travis Etienne. For me, Etienne's home run playability, his speed, his proven ability to contribute to the passing game as well this past season, and I love his fit in Jacksonville. But it's interesting because I think, you can make similar concerns here with Travis Etienne, having James Robinson to split the backfield with. And there's going to be people in your league, I think, that, will prioritize Javonte Williams over Travis Etienne in some leagues and flip-flopped in other leagues. So, I think this range, though, 108, 109, is where you're probably going to get these 2 quarterbacks, or these 2 running backs, I'm sorry. Anywhere from 107 to 110, these 2 guys are going to come off the board, I think, in every league. And so you have to be prepared, understand ahead of time, do you prefer Travis Etienne? Are you okay with Javonte Williams? If Etienne goes, do you still want to put your running back there in that spot? So, whether you prefer Javonte Williams or Travis Etienne, this is probably the range these guys are going to come off the board. I will say, too, Javonte Williams, his landing spot in Denver is interesting to me, because I agree with you, Price. I think in a year, it will feel a lot better, but we just have to understand as Dynasty players to be patient, right? Because sometimes we're not as patient as we should be. So if you're drafting Javonte Williams, just don't sell in a year. Give yourself at least a 2-year commitment, right? Like, write it down on a piece of paper and stick it in front of you when you're making your lineup changes. Okay, so
it's
go ahead.
So tough because last year we had like all of these juicy landing spots.
Right.
CEH goes to KC. Then we have Jonathan Taylor in Indy, and we have. Just everybody landed, with the exception of maybe you can make the argument that like Swift's wasn't great, but now his is looking awesome. Like he's the only ride in town. So I mean, all of these guys landed in just such incredible spots that now that people are looking at this and they're like, well, these are all terrible spots. No, this is just more normal. Like, it usually doesn't work out this beautifully as it did in the 2020 class.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think we got a little dose of reality as fantasy football players this draft season. All right, Drew, I think this is where the draft really starts to open up a little bit here with the 110. I could, potentially see you going in a variety of different directions. So who are you going to go with here?
I'm going to go with a guy that I have went on Twitter and done threads against, I believe on 3 separate occasions, saying do not draft him at his ADP. And his name is Kyle Pitts, and this is, I don't think, at his ADP, so I'm pretty happy. We're at 110. I'm taking Kyle Pitts. I believe Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect in my database that goes back to 2003. The only guy that's comparable is Kellen Winslow and Noah Fant. Those are the 3 best prospects analytically since 2004. I'm getting Kyle Pitts at 110. I have rallied against do not draft Kyle Pitts in like the top 5, top 6, because he's just not going to return enough value there. At 10, I think we're laughing. I think it's pretty good value. And honestly, I don't hate any of the picks you guys made above him, other than all of Matt's picks, of course. They were really bad. But anyways, Kyle Pitts, he's landing in Atlanta. He's probably not going to have a huge rookie season by any stretch. But with him being paired with Calvin Ridley isn't like a true alpha, in my opinion. He's probably more like a Robin than a Batman. And I believe Kyle Pitts can be a Batman like a Travis Kelce. I'm not 100% confident that's what's going to happen. I think it's in his range of outcomes, though. So it's nice that he's not paired up with like if he landed in a place with like Jamar Chase, I would be a little bit more hesitant. He lands in a place where he has a nice Robin to go with him. And the offense is probably going to be pretty good for the next few years as long as they keep Matt Ryan around, which I think he's about 35, 36. So he's probably got a couple years left. So I think we're going to see some fireworks out of Kyle Pitts probably as soon as 2022.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are probably listening to this mock draft right now and surprised that we didn't hear Kyle Pitts' name called a little bit sooner. I know folks are eager to get him on their team, whether you're in a tight end premium league or not. Again, this is not a tight end premium rookie draft, but I think I would have gone Kyle Pitts here at 110 or no later than 111. So he's definitely easily a first round pick. I think Atlanta does help him. It actually makes me like him a little bit more in the short term. But why don't we go ahead and move on to Price here with the 111.
I'm pretty happy, with all my pre-draft grades. I've gotten, I guess it was my quarterback 2 with Justin Fields and quarterback 3 with Trey Lance. And then I got my running back 1 and Javonte Williams. And actually my wide receiver 1 is still on the board. And so I'm going to take Devonta Smith that just ended up in Philadelphia with the 10th overall pick. I know that people are so concerned about his weight, and I think it's ridiculous when you watch him play, and it was really great to see Matt Harmon talk about it as well, because it was matching up with what I was seeing on tape. People were like, well, what about press coverage? He's too little. He can't. He was literally the best in the class versus press coverage in both his junior campaign and his senior campaign. Like, not an issue. Contested catches, not an issue. Like, all of the things that you're worried about with the physicality are just not issues with him. He plays at a much stronger size, or he plays much stronger than his size would indicate.
Right.
So we saw him win the freaking Heisman this year, and he did it with more or less. He was the only guy there.
Right.
And I know that they had Menchie and they had some of these other guys, but it wasn't like it was the season before when Jerry Jeudy was there and Henry Ruggs was there and the other guys to divert their eyes, to look away. No, he was there all by himself, and he was making that happen game in and game out against SEC cornerbacks, which are probably the best you're going to find in college football. So all of these things happen. He ends up in Philadelphia. I understand I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts guy either, but there has been no one in that offense, at least in the wide receiver group, that has asserted themselves as the top wide receiver. My boy J-Jaw, he died. Jalen Reagor didn't have a great year last year. We're not even sure Zach Ertz will still be on the team. So it's really Goddard, and it's going to be Devonta Smith. And I'm really excited to see what he does there in Philly.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick there at 111. I don't think he should fall out of the first round of any rookie drafts. I think that would be an absolute mistake. He steps in for me. He's wide receiver 1 immediately on the offense. To be honest, he would probably be potentially even higher for me if we knew what the quarterback situation was going to be. Hurts showed some great flashes, but his accuracy rate was low. And for the wide receivers, that could be a little bit of an issue, but the volume is there. Absolutely. So I think you made some great points there. I'm going to finish up round 1 here with my guy. He definitely slid in draft capital, but he still made it into the second round of the NFL draft, and I love his landing spot personally. I'm not upset at all that Terrace Marshall ended up in Carolina. I think the immediate reaction has been negative towards Terrace Marshall in Carolina, but I went through before the draft here and actually did my full 2021 season projections for each NFL team, full dynasty, getting everybody into the spreadsheet. And Carolina came into draft weekend with a 20% vacancy in their receiving shares. And that was me giving DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson more than 20% target share alone. So there's actually a pretty good amount of volume there. Terrace Marshall also pairs up with his former college offensive coordinator in Joe Brady, which also makes me think they may envision keeping Robbie Anderson on the outside and letting Terrace Marshall play big slot, which he did at LSU with Joe Brady. And I know Price knows this because we just did a little deal involving him. I'm still in on Sam Darnold. So I think it's a quarterback upgrade in Carolina compared to Teddy Bridgewater last year. And I believe in Terrace Marshall's skill set. His tape grade was the wide receiver 3 for me. Going in, he actually did slide to wide receiver 4 because I do like Devonta Smith's landing spot. So I'm all in on Terrace Marshall. I'll take him 10 out of 10 times if he's available at the 112, which I think in most rookie drafts he probably will be, but I'm happy to soak up that value. And I'm also happy here to jump into round 2 of this rookie mock draft. And gentlemen, we'll move just with a little bit quicker of a pace here in this second round, which probably makes sense because although there's definitely still some exciting players, probably a little bit less analysis to go along with it. And Drew, I'll let you kick us off here at 201.
Sure. So I'm going to take my wide receiver 2 in the class, Rashad Bateman. He kind of fell for me a little bit in the process. Like I really thought he was going to be like a Davante Adams type prospect coming out, which isn't like which is not to say Davante Adams, the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty right now. That's not what Davante Adams was as a prospect. I thought that Rashad Bateman, like everyone, was 6'2", 210 pounds because that's what he's listed at. He measured in at 6 foot 190, which moved him into my beta tier. I do alpha and beta wide receivers. It shows what their upside is. Like we see the alphas hit wide receiver 1 upside pretty frequently in comparison to the betas. So it moved Bateman from an alpha to a beta, and we affectionately now refer to him as Rashad Bateman in the Patrons Discord. So I'm taking him here because I'm not that afraid of the Baltimore landing spot. I don't love it by any stretch, don't get me wrong. But to be perfectly honest, I'm looking at team rankings, NFL, pass attempts per game. And last year, Baltimore was terrible. They had 26.7 or something. I'm not on that page right now. The year prior, though, they had 29.4. And you know who always has 29.4-ish pass attempts? The Seattle Seahawks and the Tennessee Titans. And they have DK Metcalf and they have A.J. Brown. And those guys are in the conversation for wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty. So I'm not that afraid of Baltimore's landing spot. I'm still in on Rashad Bateman. Shoddy B, as Ray GQ affectionately referred to him as. Sorry, I tried to go fast. You're up.
No, you're good. I think Rashad Bateman is a really interesting pick. He's a nice example here of how there's definitely still value pushing into the second round. It's going to be a really interesting experience here to see how Baltimore uses Rashad Bateman. Of course, they also added Tylan Wallace here in day 3, which, as a Ravens fan, I love that double up at the wide receiver position. But the Ravens seem to just love 6 foot and under wide receivers. They seem to be really committed to that mold. But, I think Rashad Bateman is a really interesting guy. And I wonder if Tylan Wallace, his new teammate, will be off the board by the end of this mock draft too. But I don't think he'll be off the board next. If I had to guess, Price, who are you going here with 202?
Yeah, at this point, it's a super flex draft. And we had a guy go in the first round of the NFL draft, and he still hasn't been taken. So I have to go Mac Jones. I'm not even a Mac Jones fan. But at this point, if you get a super flex quarterback that is even average, not even above average, just average, there's really, really good value in that.
Yeah.
I don't think that Mac Jones is ever going to be what Justin Fields could be or Trey Lance could be, or like some of these players that just have crazy upside, because we know that he's not a superstar athlete by any stretch of the imagination. He's more in that game manager mode where he's going to get the ball, get it out quick, make smart decisions. But still, even if he just ends up being a Kirk Cousins type of quarterback, that's still a really, really valuable quarterback too. And you can trade those guys for, a much higher level player at a different position in super flex leagues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think this is a question that I've seen a lot. I'm sure you guys have too. At what point do we just take the L, bite the bullet, draft Mac Jones, right? And if you're looking at it here, if this was an actual roster drafting from the 102 slot, right? You drafted your quarterback in the first round in Justin Fields. He went 102 in this mock, and then you get Mac Jones at 202. You're probably a rebuilding roster, right? So in a super flex league, I always say if you don't have two good quarterbacks and at least one other, startable quarterback in a Superflex league, you're probably not a competitor. I don't care how good the rest of your roster is. So you got to get your quarterbacks. You got to secure the foundation of your Superflex roster first. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense here with Mac Jones. I'm going to go here. There's honestly one more wide receiver before things start to really open up for me. and we can go in a variety of directions. And at 203, I'm going to get the last wide receiver probably before a teardrop here. And I'm going to peel back the curtains. I've been updating the rookie big board all weekend for the patrons, but I have not gone in and done everybody's full projections here, especially guys that have gone on day 3. So once those are updated, I'll feel a little bit more confident. But right now at 203, I like Elijah Moore here for the New York Jets. I think he ended up with a solid landing spot, not the best in the world, but I definitely think it's a good landing spot. I like his skill set, especially the fact he's a reliable pass catcher with sticky hands. He can work over the middle of the field. He can play along the boundary, so there's some versatility there. Everybody is kind of pegging him right now into that Jamison Crowder role, which if I had to put money down, that's kind of what he's playing, but he's a lot more explosive and he has more touchdown potential than Jamison Crowder. So a nice floor with some nice upside. And Zack Wilson, I think, will work really well with Elijah Moore. I think he can go off, Elijah Moore, that is, could go off script when the play breaks down. And that, of course, is Zack Wilson's forte. So at 203 here, Elijah Moore is a pretty good value, and I'll pass it back over to Drew.
All right, I'm going to go with the other Moore because he's really good.
Dang it.
Gotcha, Price.
Got me.
So yeah, Rondale Moore is in terms of the best college season that we've seen from any of the wide receivers in this class, his age 18 season might be the most impressive, in my opinion. To do what he did at age 18 was incredible, absolutely incredible. The big concern here is obviously size, and I know there's an argument to be made that if these players perform this well at this size, it probably doesn't matter anymore. But I just like some kind of precedent. Otherwise, if we had some precedent of a 5'7" receiver being a wide receiver 1 at any point in history, I would feel a lot more comfortable with Rondale Moore higher on my board. Unfortunately, we have never seen that. There is some reports that Tyreek Hill might be 5'8" or 5'9" or 5'10". It's hard to know. But anyways, Rondale Moore seems like a pretty good fit in the Arizona offense. I like him to play the slot role there. And I mean, it kind of kills my guy, Christian Kirk, but c'est la vie. We're moving on, upward and onward. So yeah, going with Rondale Moore. He absolutely smashed the athletic testing. He was exceptionally productive at 18. He got hurt at 19 and 20, so his production metrics don't really work very well in my process. But what we can look at is his age 18, and then the games that he played in 19 and 20 are right on the same level that he played at 18. So it wasn't like he had a one-off season where he just got lucky. He continued it, even though it was on a small sample size. So I don't have a lot of concern about Rondale Moore being a good football player. My concern only comes from his ceiling. And if you can't reach the top shelf, I'm not sure he can reach wide receiver 1 either.
Yeah, that's a great pick here. Rondale Moore at 204. It feels right. He was somebody that I had kind of started. He started really high for me when it was just tape grade. And the more and more we learned about him, he fell out of my top 5 wide receivers. He slid down pre-draft to wide receiver 7, and I gave him a slight bump back up here. I'm guessing he's going to finish as my wide receiver 6 or 7 once I'm done making these tweaks here at the end of draft weekend. And it's because I do think that the offensive scheme fits what we want from Rondale Moore. I think he could potentially eat underneath. The red zone the potential red zone production is the only thing I'm worried about when it comes to his stat line. So that to me is what I still need to work through and decide if I want to take that risk at the 204 spot. But I think it's well worth this value point here, and I think it lines up with what we're probably going to see in ADP. And also, I know you sniped Price here, so I'm interested to see who he scrambles to take next.
Yeah, scramble's the right word, because I have like 6 different guys that are running through my mind right now to potentially take, and I don't really love any of them. There's a lot of like going on, but not a lot of love. So we're going to go with this is probably, I think you can make the argument this is probably the highest risk reward type of pick that we've had thus far, but I'm going to go with Kadarius Toney,
yeah.
wide receiver that just went to the New York Giants. And Hicks, you're a Giants fan, so I know that you probably have an opinion. I actually haven't heard it yet, but I'm sure you have an opinion on this. He came into the process as my wide receiver 8. We do these film grades. So for me, he ended up with a 74.43 for my tape grade. And which was just a completely different tier from the top 6 guys that were all 77s and up. So I think he's a good player. The things that do concern me are, first of all, why did it take him so long to turn into this guy?
Mm-hmm.
He looked great this year. There were some things that I saw at the Senior Bowl where his hands were just, I don't know if he had the yips during the Senior Bowl. I don't know what happened, but he couldn't even catch a pitch thrown to him. Like it was bad. But his hands were definitely better on tape. There's still some double catching, which I don't like to see, but there weren't nearly as many drops as what I saw at the Senior Bowl. Super explosive athlete, super explosive athlete. But his route running is interesting because one-on-one drills, you'll dazzle over it. You'll be like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. But the problem is you don't have that kind of time in a real game to do all of these ins and outs and ups and downs and all of, like he is writing an entire narrative with his routes there, and we just don't have time to read that book, and that's the problem. So I like Kadarius Toney. I do. I think there's a lot of upside with his yards after the catch ability. But this could also be one of those situations where I look back and I'm like, man, I lit that pick on fire. Like that did nothing for me. But once I get past the first half of the second round, I'm really looking at upside, and I think he's one of the guys that has the higher upside.
Yeah, I mean, it's as a Giants fan, it was a startling pick. It actually was. I'm kind of used to questionable picks. Daniel Jones, but this was really surprising for me. So I think from inside the Giants, rumors, what it sounds like is they were sold on Devonta Smith. The Giants or the Cowboys let the Eagles leapfrog the Giants, and they kind of scrambled after trading back with the Bears, and they ended up with Kadarius Toney. For me, I think I tweeted out after they took him that Kadarius Toney went from probably a fade to absolutely a fade for me. I worry about manufactured production. I really worry about how that translates to the next level. But, you can't ignore the argument for draft capital here. And, there's certainly some upside here with Kadarius Toney. If we want to extrapolate probably too far here, maybe Kadarius Toney looks good with the quarterback that the Giants draft after finishing bottom 5 in the league again this year and having 2 first-round draft picks. So maybe that'll be good news for Kadarius Toney in his second year. But I'm in an interesting spot here. There's definitely a few directions, probably 4 players on the board right now that are all serious considerations for me with this next pick. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the second tight end off the board in this rookie mock, and I'm going to take Pat Freiermuth. And, I'm not going to back off of it. Everyone knows I'm a Brevin Jordan fan, and that certainly was not great. So Pat Freiermuth is not only tight end 2, but probably the drop-off. I mean, a little interest in Hunter Long maybe, but if you're going to get a tight end, it kind of has to be Kyle Pitts or Pat Freiermuth, in my opinion, at this point in time. So I'm going to jump on the potential tight end drop-off here in the mid-second round. The other thing I will say, I went in and I did plug in Pat Freiermuth in the Pittsburgh offense. I love the fit from an NFL perspective because he is a two-way tight end. He's going to smash people in the mouth. I think it's going to help Najee Harris because he is a reliable run blocker as well. I mean, Pat Freiermuth is an absolute monster, but he has great hands as well. And when I initially plugged him into the projections, it actually came out too good because I plugged him in with what I thought he could realistically get in that offense. They gave a good amount of targets to the tight end position over the last couple of years, despite the fact that they really haven't had ultra-talented tight ends over the last couple of years. I apologize to Eric Ebron. And so I had to go back, compare what I put in to Pat Freiermuth, look at historical tight end production, and I knocked him down a little bit here to make it more realistic and on historical trends. So even that being said, 2-3 years down the road, you're looking at a lot of vacated production, most likely next year when Juju's contract is up. Who knows if they keep James Washington long-term. So there's definitely some production that could be heading Pat Freiermuth's way in the future. So at 2.6, I'm happy to take him here. And I'll go ahead and pass it back on over to Drew here with the 2.7.
All right, I have been playing it safe this whole time and just taking, high floor players. I'm about to reach for the stars. I am taking Trey Sermon at this point.
All right.
And
Thought about him.
I thought he was like a film grinder, favorite, and here he is available to me.
The analytics guy got him.
He checks no boxes in my process other than he's big and he's athletic. And now he landed in San Francisco, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll take him. Like, they've made bad running backs look good for years, so maybe Sermon's got a shot. I've honestly nothing good to say about him other than he is 6 foot 215 and he has a 9.66 RAS score, which is elite. That's all I have for him. So I will turn it over to you guys now.
See why I love this? I love this balance in here. That's a fantastic pick right there from Drew. And a good example, too, of at some point in a draft, right? You just take what's there. You take the value of what's there in a rookie draft. So you can't come in, have 4 picks for what you want to do each round and hope you nail those picks. You got to be a little bit flexible. So in all seriousness, Drew, I think that's a great example of how to properly play the board and the way the draft goes. But Price, I know you mentioned that you thought about him there. I'm sure you would have loved to get a Buckeye on your roster. But how are we going to pivot to 208? Or 208.
At 208, this was one of the players that fell a little bit further than I thought they would. I thought they would get a little bit better draft capital, but they actually came in with my 7th highest score at wide receiver for my tape grade. And watching this guy play, and the player's Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay.
Yep. It was tough for me to take a day 3 guy at this point, but it was very, very early 4th round draft capital. He was 6th, 7th pick in. I loved what I saw on tape from Amon-Ra. He's a very, very smooth operator. His release off the line is some of the best in the class. Always under control, able to make both the over the middle stuff, but also can do some of the jump ball stuff as well. And it's a situation where there's nobody else. Like, there's nobody else to really catch passes there in Detroit. Yeah. Like, Quintez Cephas, is that who we're banking on to be the wide receiver 1? What is happening up there? I know that they're building up the trenches, and I respect that from a guy that played college football. I respect that they're building up their trenches. But you still need playmakers at some point. Amon-Ra is a guy that can make some plays, so I'm going to take him here.
I absolutely love that pick. It was between St. Brown for me and this next receiver that I'm going to take, so you made my job easy. In St. Brown, this is going to be an interesting philosophical conversation because St. Brown, I'm pretty confident he's going to get more volume than the guy I'm taking, but he has lower draft capital. I like Dwayne Eskridge a lot. He was somebody who I had high in my process coming in. I kind of planted my flag that he was going to be a 2nd round rookie pick before the draft, and now I feel confident standing next to that flag. I think this is just about where he's going to go in all your rookie drafts. And I'm a big fan. Now, is the landing spot ideal? Not ideal, but also not terrible. So I think if Seattle goes back to passing the ball at the high volume they started last season at, which of course Russell Wilson would enjoy, then Dwayne Eskridge has a quick path to fantasy football success because he's got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett pulling the top coverage of him off the field. And so what he's going to be able to do is play over the middle of the field. He was a boundary guy. I think he'll probably play inside. Maybe they'll play Lockett outside, put Eskridge outside. You have a little bit of versatility there. But either way, I think Eskridge is going to be able to be explosive, work in a straight line, stretch the field. And what I've kind of compared Dwayne Eskridge to fantasy football-wise, this entire process, is what you get from a healthy Will Fuller. And if I could get that in the mid-second round paired up with an elite quarterback like Russell Wilson, even though the team might not pass the ball as much as we would like to see, then I'd be all in on it. So Dwayne Eskridge out of Western Michigan for me is somebody that I would be happy to take here with the 209. And Drew, we got one more pick left for you here in our 2-round rookie mock draft. So is this going to be an analytics darling that you are just locked in on, or are you just going to take somebody here who you feel is a really good value?
I'm going to take the analytics darling. I'm going to go with Dyami Brown at this point.
Okay.
I really like his profile. He was an exceptional producer in college, and he got, I believe, 3rd-round draft capital, which is good enough for me. And he is going to the Washington football team, which I really like what they've done this offseason, to be perfectly honest. They already had Terry McLaurin. They added Curtis Samuel through free agency. Now they add Diami Brown. I suspect that puts Samuel into the slot, and Diami will play kind of a stretch type role, which probably isn't going to be great for fantasy, but there's a chance that he's more than that, and we'll just have to find out. What I do know is that he was productive in college, and that's something that I look for. There was a time where I thought that I was going to like Diami Brown more than I ended up liking him, because there was a picture that went on Instagram some point in January, February, and it said he's 197 pounds. It was him standing on a scale, and the scale read 197 pounds. And then at some point before his pro day, he went on a massive diet and weighed in 185, and that put him into my beta bucket, which is unfortunate. Probably means he's never going to be wide receiver 1, or at least not a perennial one. He could have an off season, or like one off season where he gets there, but going to go for the floor here. He's a good player. I mean, you want good players. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be throwing it up at least this year, so we'll see what happens.
All right. I think that's a pick that a lot of folks are waiting to hear, and somebody that we have a lot of questions on for value. I do think, looking at the board and who's around here, he should be a late 2nd-round pick. I think that's going to match what we're going to see in a lot of rookie drafts here early on, at least this offseason. All right, so Price, we have one more rookie pick here for you as well. So why don't you go ahead and make the selection here at 211?
My last guy, he came in as my running back 6 when I did the tape grades, and one of the few guys that landed in a position where we're actually excited about his opportunity to maybe get the ball, and that's going to be Michael Carter from North Carolina. I liked the kid. I didn't love the kid. I know there were some people that had him as high as their running back 4. Actually, I lied. He's my running back 7. But over there were a couple guys that I liked their tape a little bit more. Specifically, Kylan Hill was one of the guys that I liked more. But the NFL told me that they don't like him nearly as much as I do. And there's times where, you see something on tape and you would be all about that. But there's so many things behind the scenes that we're not getting to see, as far as, how their interviews go, and, different medicals that, aren't released to us until after the fact that we hear that, oh, his knee's in really bad shape, or different things. So there's just so many behind the scenes stuff that we don't know. I'm waiting to hear what that was for Kylan Hill and why it seems like he's dropping so far. But because of that, Michael Carter just screams value at this point. There's not a lot of running backs available. There's not many that we really want to get on our fantasy football teams. Most of them are in, at best timeshare situations. And a lot of the guys like, Chuba and Kenneth Gainwell are behind players that we don't think they're going to get the ball a ton. So I think Michael Carter is the one player here that we could see a decent workload pretty early on.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick here. Michael Carter is somebody who, there are Michael Carter truthers, like you alluded to, and I think when they heard that the Jets were going to be the spot, we saw the volume, we see the opportunity, and we see a good player, and I think somebody that should earn equal to, if not more, volume immediately as LaMichael Pirine, who the Jets kind of took in a similar draft capital position last year. Maybe they add a veteran, in the post-draft phase. That always happens, but at least for now, sitting here at 211, you're getting a close to, if not starting running back in the NFL year 1. So I think that's a great pick. Gentlemen, I have a lot of directions I could go down here with this final pick at 212, and I think it could really gauge kind of what it looks like moving into the 3rd and 4th rounds of your rookie drafts. Before I make the final selection, though, I want to one more time go around and just make sure that people really understand where they can find your content, because I mentioned this earlier, but Drew, I'm a supporter of yours on Patreon. Garret, I am a subscriber for the Dynasty Nerds, so I am all in on these guys. I use both of their resources. I love their products, so I want to make sure that the listeners know about them as well. So Price, I'll let you quickly just talk about the Nerds and anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, all my stuff, you can find it on Dynasty Nerds. I'm one of the podcast hosts there. We do the Nerd Score, which is basically a culmination of a lot of different tape grades that we have. We always lock them before the NFL draft even happens, so we can't subconsciously be influenced by them. We could say like, oh no, I always hated Jarrett Patterson. But in reality, I just knew that he didn't get drafted at all. So, So we do that way we can get the full transparency of it. We have the film room, so you can go and you can watch some of the same games that we've been watching. And really the biggest selling point for us is our GM tool. You can put in all of your teams in there. It'll kind of tell you where you're strong, where you're weak, let you know what the rest of your league looks like, give you different trade opportunities, different things like that.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic resource. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm on Patreon, patreon.com/bulletproofff. And then I've got the, podcast, Bulletproof Fantasy Football, YouTube, Bulletproof Fantasy Football. And I'm on Twitter at DF Beancounter.
Absolutely. And if you all want access, if you do not already have access to the Rookie Big Board, you can head on over to patreon.com/theFFeducator. I will have all of these rankings updated, most likely by the time you're listening to this, with projections, 2021 projections for each of these rookies, updated Rookie Big Board score based on draft capital and what I call opportunity index, which is a combination of short and long-term opportunity for these players to live up to the tape grades that I've already given to 102 of them for this draft class. So with this final pick, I mentioned there's a lot of different directions I could go down here. Quarterback is an option in a super flex league. Do I go after somebody like Kellen Mond in Minnesota or even Davis Mills in Houston, who could potentially be starting quarterbacks down the line? Do I just go for guys that I had a high tape score on, but maybe didn't get the draft capital I wanted? I'm thinking Tylan Wallace. I'm thinking Kenneth Gainwell as somebody who I think we would have been shocked to consider at 212 here just a month ago. So there's a few different options for me. Do you go with somebody with really high draft capital, but maybe not as high of a tape score, like a Josh Palmer ending up here in the third round? So a lot of different directions. But for me, I'm gonna go with my film eval, and I'm gonna take Kenny Gainwell. And I like Kenny Gainwell. He's certainly going to drop for me. He was 13th on my board pre-draft, so we're taking him 24. That's 11 spots for him to drop off. So it is a pretty significant drop off. And we're going to need a little bit of help fantasy-wise, right? I mean, Kenny Gainwell is not going to come in Philadelphia and compete right away. But injuries happen in football. We understand that. Injuries have happened. Miles Sanders has missed time. And I do think, even with a healthy Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell can be a potential flex type guy in deeper leagues, which a lot of our listeners are playing in. If you're listening to the Rookie Big Board, you're probably playing in some deep leagues, right? We are on that level of degeneracy. And I know Drew and Price are with me as well. So is the draft capital great? No. But if you loved Kenny Gainwell going into the draft, make an adjustment, right? Don't take him at 13th overall, which is where I had him pre-draft, but take him at the back end of the second round. If he's there in the mid-third and you love Kenny Gainwell, take your guy. You know what I mean? Even in the sixth round, especially with running backs, if there's one position I feel most confident in, late round draft capital, it's these running backs that we consistently see make a difference. Guys who go in the 5th, 6th, 7th, UDFA. I'm arguing on my timeline with folks of whether James Robinson, the UDFA, is still fantasy worthy. Everybody's telling me he's still the running back one with Travis Etienne off the board. So, we tend to get away with draft capital a little bit at the running back position. So I'll take Kenny Gainwell. It was very close there between him and Tylan Wallace. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining for this it's going to be the first post-NFL rookie mock draft, 2 rounds. Make sure you check these guys out. Make sure you support them. And as always, thanks for checking out this episode of the Rookie Big Board.